¿Qué tal? Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I hope that you're full of energy, ready to start with our afternoon session. A very interesting workshop. We will be hearing from Vicente Aguilera and Carlos Seis Dedos. They will tell us how terrorist organizations organize themselves to make the most of these vulnerabilities. Please access our INCIBE and on Twitter with the CyberCamp hashtag. I'm not going to take any of their time. Well, Carlos is an analyst. Vicente was the founder of the Spanish chapter for his organization and the author of the InfoLeak 2. I hope you enjoy their presentation. Good afternoon. Let me start with a word of thanks. I want to thank INCIBE. I want to thank the organizers of the event in general. And logically, I want to thank them for inviting us to be here today, to tell you about techniques and tools that can be useful when we investigate potential suspicious profiles for different terrorist individuals or organizations. That's the topic for our presentation today. Carlos and I will take it in turns. There will be some formal explanations, some more practical work. We will tell you about jihadist terrorism. Well, here we see the table of contents for our presentation. Starting, as I said, with jihadist terrorism. And Carlos will tell you more about this side of things. Those of you who work with cyber intelligence and jihadist profiles, Carlos is a true specialist. We hope you find our workshop interesting. I would also like to thank the organizers and all of you for making it here nice and early, straight after lunch. This is a little bit of background. Here we see this piece of infographics. The Spanish Ministry for the Interior summarizes the different operations they have been covering in 2017. I don't want you to think so much about the actual details, but I just wanted to see that there's a very homogeneous distribution of the different operations. On the eastern coast, Catalonia, up in the northeast, and in Madrid, the capital city, logically, there's a higher volume of people who've been arrested accused of jihadist terrorism. Let me just tell you about this study covering the period from 2013 to 2017, where 234 people were arrested, accused as suspected jihadist terrorists. Well, 51% were accused for disseminating propaganda on social media. That's the new scenario. Because jihadist terrorism, people tend to think about attacks against the police, bombs. So how does that have to do with cyber jihadist terrorism? Well, it's everything that has to do with jihadist terrorism on the cyberspace. Attacks where the cybernetic attacks where the motivation is a jihadist ideology. And here we can see this poster that was published by one of the groups that, well, later we will refer to them during the presentation. It's a group of inverted commas hackers, and they published this, they posted this poster. This is terror not just from a physical point of view, like in the terrorist attacks in Barcelona or Madrid. They actually mix that with the virtual environment. And statistically, we know that about 50% of those arrested had to do with physical terrorist attacks, whereas the remaining 50% had to do with trying to capture new members, and also with propaganda. Here we can see this piece of infographics that tells us how at the top we have the Daesh propaganda organization. Here at the bottom we see, shall we say, the content consumers. And originally their objective was meant to be attracting combatants, that is, convincing them later to travel over to Syria or wherever they were needed to wage their war. Well, more and more they're trying to attract cyber combatants, that is, people who can not go and physically battle or fight, but actually to disseminate this propaganda, and also for attacks to take place in their own countries of residence. Are we just talking about terrorists in general? Well, that's not really the case. Here we can see how there are people who are followers or who sympathize with that ideology, who are followers, who are then, some of them, actual terrorists. There are people who remain for a long time at the same level of that pyramid, whereas in other cases, people start at the bottom, but then they climb up that ladder quite fast in some cases. Now we will continue to hear now from Vicente. So we'll be talking a lot about the social media. We will be talking about physical social networks as well, physically so. Because before virtual social media started, this was the scenario. Somebody was connected with different people, but that had a limit. Connections and nodes were not those many. Whereas the social media, more and more, has extended the number of contacts and nodes that we have contact with, which is very relevant in the case of terrorism. We know that a little bit about facts and figures talking about social media. And the title of our presentation, part of it has to do with SOCMINT, because some 80% of intelligence generation nowadays has to do with analysis and interpreting data that are connected with open source computing, and social media play a very relevant role. The level of exposure that we have for other people to know what we say is completely different now with social media. When we talk about identifying people who are more relevant in this network, for instance, well, that's very different now with social media as far as investigation is concerned. So there's the social network circle, the social media circle, and what we're interested in is that overlap between those two circles. That's where we like investigating and identify an individual at that area of overlap. Here we can see what investigations used to cover in the past, not so recent past. Investigators would work like this. That's right, because in the past you would be investigating, you would have your sources for information. So during the investigation, you would try and find which member of this group was most relevant for efforts to be focused on that particular person and make the most of the resources. But that has been changed recently. That's right, with social media now. That system is much more dynamic, much more complex. So what tools and techniques can we use so that we can make the most of any information that we can access so that our resources are better used? This is the cyber caliphate. What do we mean by that? Well, we talk about Daesh, but it could be any other terrorist group. Well, when they declared their caliphate, they were talking about something that was very much physical, geographically physical. But then more and more in the social media, there's something called the cyber caliphate. A label they quite like because a number of the groups that have been set up have been named according to this name. So what do they use? Normal social media, whether it is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, blogs. Then the zero zone for content dissemination, Telegram, WhatsApp, less so, and Threema. And then the Tor network, Freenet, I2P, not so much because their identity is much more easily identified in those cases. So they try very, very hard with manuals and handbooks about how to use the Tor network and so on. But they also know perfectly well that their users find this a lot harder, that anonymity is a lot harder to achieve, much harder than if they used Telegram, say. So if they use a virtual number to set up a new account, well, with Telegram you just need a phone number to register a new account. Telegram never asks you to access your account ever again. So I start a new account, then I get rid of that phone number. There's no way to again connect that person with that particular account. That's why the Tor network is a lot harder to use for them than Telegram. Telegram allows for up to 1.5 gigas to be transferred. It allows for backup channels. You have your own sort of cloud as well. So no matter how much we make an effort, they're always ahead of us. An administrator can be in charge of a number of different channels. So when the police close a particular channel, all they lose is their followers. Then what they would do is, again, disseminate their link in the rest of the channels they operate, and the channel is active back again. So no matter what we try and do to stop these channels, they, as I said, sprout back very quickly back again. Because the social media disseminate their messages and hide their identity. Messages are very, very easily disseminated through the social media. That's right. So from January, sorry, let me stop and starts again. So, as far as we can see, Telegram and Twitter are the two main platforms terrorists use for indoctrination and dissemination of their messages. There are other platforms that are used as well, but volume-wise, these two are the giants. So, from January to November this year, just to give you an idea, we have been monitoring channels that might have to do with terrorist organizations. Well, I actually monitored over 4 million messages. So, in my opinion, this zero zone for dissemination means that all the contents go on Telegram first, and then from Telegram they're further disseminated and spread through other channels. For instance, from Telegram to Twitter, and then on the Twitter account, again, you would have links and connections with other social media, with other storage possibilities, back and forth. So out of those over 4 million messages that were analyzed, we found that over 1.5 million of URLs were shared, initially published or posted on Telegram, and then onto Facebook, Twitter, Google Drive, well, a long list of them. This image is an infographics that stands for the share of information that was shared through the different channels. So again, it's Telegram that is the largest to start off with. But for instance, if I have 10 channels, as soon as I set up my 11th channel, then I disseminate the contact for that new channel on the first 10, logically. So the following main channel for dissemination would be Twitter. So most of them start on Telegram, then they go on to Twitter, and then sometimes back to Telegram again to a different channel on Telegram. And they have a very clear, specific target. Now we consume multimedia and technology very, very easily. And apart from having all sorts of different services, we can see the type of messages they disseminated only last year. Almost 300,000 videos, 1.2 million images, 111,000 audios, almost 35,000 zipped files, 45,000 documents, and almost 15,000 applications. So, followers of terrorists logically find it very, very simple to have a mobile phone, and if a URL has been shared, there's no need to go to the computer at home and securitize or secure anything. They just watch it and share it on their mobile phone. That's their normal target, that type of individual. And that's why they publish these types of contents. And Telegram has no storage limitations, particularly. They don't need to count that it's under 140 characters, or they don't need to make sure that it's only very short videos. Telegram makes it very easy for them. That's right. And also their service for storage on the cloud. That's right. For instance, films are not particularly shared on torrent very much these days. It's becoming more and more common doing so on Telegram. Why? Because of the storage capacity. There's no limit, really, for content storage. They use Telegram for storage, and they have their handbooks and instructions explaining how, when a channel has a lot of interesting content, there should be backups of those contents so that they can then be uploaded again very, very easily if anything went wrong. They also often ask their followers to make sure that if a channel goes, well, and there's always an email address or an alias or nick. Why? Because there are different types of channels. We haven't explained that yet. If I may, let me just summarize that side of things, because otherwise you'll get a little bit lost. Their system for propaganda is distributed, in my opinion, into 4 groups. For content dissemination. One is their official news channel. For instance, when there's a terrorist attack anywhere in the world, they claim it. They have agencies. For instance, this is MAC, one of their agencies, but they have them all over the world in all sorts of different languages. They do their translations from Arabic, which is the normal first language, into all sorts of languages. And Daesh says these are independent agencies, that they only publish information that has nothing to do with terrorism, but we know they do, really. This type of channel is just in charge of dissemination, because there are other channels that are not just about dissemination, but rather dissemination with interaction. There's no interaction on official channels. You need to be invited to be there, and then you can be consumer of their contents. But there's no interaction with admins or with other users. What else do we have? Well, the non-official or unofficial news agencies. They pick up on news published by official agencies, and apart from disseminating that content, they do more than that. They translate into different languages, whether it's pieces of news or handbooks or instructions, a lot of the times from English into different languages. For instance, this agency, 24-Hour Caliphate, publishes in lots of different languages to, again, disseminate their messages. Now, this channel allows for interaction. You can read and share contents posted by other users. There are sometimes internal debates about the quality of a particular content or about the purpose for a particular event. Here we have the third type of channel, which is the fan boys channels. What is that? Well, they repost news both from official and unofficial channels, but they do so quite freely, shall we say. For instance, also posting posters and infographics and multimedia content, which are quite controversial, trying to encourage their followers to do certain things. And their contents logically can be shared, but also you can debate, you can add additional contents, you can add links to other sites, and so on. So just for you to get an idea how important these boys channels actually are, because sometimes people say, well, this is not an officially terrorist channel. terrorists don't actually own these channels we hear. Oh, look at this image here. These two police officers, the image has been taken from the back, and right behind them there's a van, and here is an arm with a knife. This is an image where the message is those two police officers are being threatened with a knife. Some of you might think, well, so what? Why is that important? Well, when in Cornellà, near Barcelona, there was an attempted knifing of a female police officer at the door, at the entrance of the police station. But this poster had been posted only 3 days before that attack took place. Is that relevant or not? When I talk about posters, well, it's a label I've given it. It's this type of image. Here on the right, we can see a poster. Here it says that Daesh is beating Spain 1-0. Well, that was just before the Barcelona attacks. The other type of channel are groups of hackers that organize actions on the social media. I can tell you that in this type of group, there's massive scanning so that Facebook publications can be used for their own interest. They also try and post and repost content taken from other channels. So, this is a way to follow and understand the ideas they promote and disseminate. That's right. They sometimes use mass media to try and attract new followers, new combatants, so they can be indoctrinated and become full members. Well, in this case, Daesh hackers, what do they want? Well, new members, because some of them have been eliminated or arrested, and sometimes because they have internal divisions. Here we can see that 2 of them have disappeared over a period of just a few months. So groups tend to come and go, and what do they do? Well, sometimes to become a member, you need to go through different filters and prove that you can do different activities to explain what you can contribute. So I explained about the propaganda organization, how they try and attract new cyber jihadists, and what they want over and above anything else is users, consumers of those contents, whether it's on Telegram, on Twitter, whatever. And once they've been attracted as followers or sympathizers, well, they can go up that ladder, that pyramid I showed earlier, to become full terrorists. This is the kind of thing that we look out for. Here we can see how this man says clearly, hello, people in Spain. I'm looking for people in Spain, sorry, so they can carry out a terrorist attack. This is the kind of message that we look out for. This piece of infographics we see shows us the different elements that are involved in these activities on the social media, with different nodes, different members. This is the type of information and data that we try and analyze and process, so that is not just information but true intelligence. So when we try and identify individuals and connections and nodes. That's where social media and intelligence tools are ideal. What do we need so that we have true high-quality intelligence? Well, we need to combine products from different disciplines. We'll see later about different mints. UMint, for instance. UMint is one of the products that is working quite well for us. So, if you asked what intelligence analysis actually means, well, we immediately think of films that we've watched. We think of the CIA, the MI6, Mossad, and yet I just want you to realize that nowadays you don't even need to think about that high level of organization for us to talk about intelligence. A lot of individuals devoting the necessary time and resources can access information and turn it into intelligence and disseminate it for a third party to consume. Honestly, anybody at home, from their home with very few resources, with access to the social media, can access and disseminate intelligent information. I'm not going to give you a lot of definitions about OSINT and SOCMINT. In the case of OSINT, open source intelligence, well, it's information, data, facts and figures based on open source technology gathered from publicly available sources for the purpose of meeting specific intelligence requirements. The beauty of OSINT is that we can supply all of that at the right time, because late is too late. Obsolete information won't be useful for the purposes they have. Maybe it would be useful to prevent future problems or whatever, but not to carry out a particular terrorist activity. Now, SOCMINT would be very much the same thing, but focusing on social media, monitoring social media, extracting information, interpreting what it means to reach certain conclusions. That is, identifying profiles and individuals in our case. So, for this, we need to start at the virtual world connections. Remember the image we showed you earlier, where there was that overlap between the two circles. So we can find people who are within that overlapping area. And is that an easy task? Not at all. But there are ways and means and tools to do so. And later on, we will tell you more about those. That's right, because sometimes we just have indications, not evidence, but at least a little bit of an indication that will lead us where we go.
Como hemos comentado, podemos llegar a...
So we forgot about the CNI, sorry about that, but we will try next to reach out to users based, as we said, on the way they use social media or internet as a whole. But as we will see, we can try and reach them through the content they disseminate, they post, and we will see a few examples. So we will have a graph. So this is a graph. Let's figure this is a structure. Regardless, well, there's a series of people here, and what we're interested in is learning which one we want to interact with, or which one we want to address or look into in order to use more resources, A, B, C, D. It'll depend on what our intentions are, not the same to try and approach someone. Because if by using social through mathematical formulae, I can see who is the one on which all the communications convert. So that's the way to learn what's going on there. And so I might want to, in a stealthy way, come and approach them. But if I'm interested in working on the speech, because that's the person or the channel that has a radical speech or that it's increasing, which is A, I might be interested in coming closer to A or someone else indirectly to try and have an influential action in order to reduce the or narrow down or relativize the speech or the utterance. But if we see that A, B, and C are in an argument, I can also approach C to incentivize that kind of a problem inside of the net. It will always be dependent on the kind of interests we want and the time we have. In order to approach a profile like this, it's not Facebook and I befriend you. It takes lots of work and environment and context, and it takes time. And based on the needs we have and the time available, techniques will vary. So here you have what we said, how we at first, when we were talking about official agencies, which was one of the main disseminators of content to indoctrinate or convince the followers to change their mindset or become radical, we refer to the a Mac agency. Up until recently, it was available on Telegram. And with this agency, as soon as it was spotted, it was reported to Twitter, but it took Twitter several days to close it down. Here, because, well, that's the screenshot, and we've seen information is very volatile. It is usually everywhere, but even more so in social media. What is now online might be gone tomorrow, or even within a few minutes it'll be locked or deleted. So we are interested in that information. We need to recover it and store it in order to have it later on. As for Twitter, let me see if I can show it to you. But we'll try and show to you what info leaks look like. For which will you magnetis? A tool I developed myself and helps much with these investigations. So it is a search inside the database that I have stored with the content published, and then it scrapes for social media or accounts, mainly Telegram, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. That process, we've said so, for 2018, that would be over 4 million messages. So figure what the processing time can be for this. In order to save us the 20 minutes of processing and to get the data per screen, we got you a short clip where you can see it. So first, front rows, you won't manage to see much, but if you're lucky enough to see the screen, you would see what we're talking about. Won't move. So let's get out of here. Well, I don't think that will be. Can we? Can you see anything? actually what we'll do here is look into the database where we keep all the information. Here we see several options. These are some functions available here. And so what we will say is get us Instagram, Twitter, and Telegram accounts. Here, what I want is to see accounts on different social media. Let's say November. Takes us a minute. It says so go grab a cafe. Well, we will not be grabbing a cafe, but around here it is working, right? So here you have it. You see, let's see whether it moves. And so it keeps gathering and posting the channels that it's finding. We'll stop here, but in order to get the information that we collected, again, Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, as well as Instagram, we will test the features of TFRX in a visual way. This tool, well, Magneto allows for extraction of this, or mining of this information, but for self-views, so screenshots and user extraction, we'll see that later. But TeamFolix is much more powerful. Well, actually, Magneto is excellent, and later you will see the power in that tool. Now what I'll do is I'll use my own laptop. Let's run TeamFolix so that you see some features. So this is Magneto. We've got the users here. This is Telegram. That was for URL extraction that are being shared, so we would get Twitter messages and some specific accounts. This is all extracted. In Magneto, one of the results it produces is a file where we have all these users, right? Yes. Well, in order to optimize and dynamize, what we've done is we've extracted it, and Vicente has the data, and he can process it. Let's try and see if we can see it. Cannot see here, can we? All right.
Si no, las primeras filas se tendrán que creer lo que veamos.
Or else the front row does need to take to believe what we say. Let's try this, or else I will run it blindly. So I'll run it from here. I'll explain what I do next, but same here, you cannot really see, but what we'll do is, as I said, we'll use TeamFolix, created a few years ago, and it's evolved. What we had, well, what our version is not been released yet, but it'll be released. And if you've seen, version 2.4 is similar. It has a graphic interface, and It allows for so many operations, and you can look into Twitter and then have the same results that can be whatever CSV formats or other output formats. So what we'll do is, starting with those users on Magneto, so following these channels close to terrorists, so they're potential users. By the way, let me say something I forgot to mention. We said that when we talk about different types of channels, apart from mass media for propaganda, we have channels for sale of weapons, merchandising, specific channels, tech channels that helps others learn how to use, girl targeted, or channels where sometimes give or whatever. So when you drag all that information posted, within that information you can find that there's one person on a given channel or a radical that maybe posts a link from BBC, El Mundo, El País newspapers where they refer to the attack. And I've seen this piece of news on the BBC, so they ask, have we done it? So there's also in-house debates, but maybe what they come and claim the attack, and if not, well, so you see there is this internal debate. Sorry about my intrusion. Actually, so users can be active, so we have Twitter accounts, and these get shut down quite fast. Maybe not as fast as we would like, but thousands of users produced have been imported to Timful Lake, and one of the features it has. So it's been limited for this demo, only 10. So it uploads all 10 users here, just to see the proof of concept. So out of 1,000, as you can see, well, some are non-existent now. So there's not an existing user. 9 are still active. So we can go to Twitter and visit each profile. But doing so manually when we have thousands and thousands of users, it's not doable, it's not realistic. So we can upload it here and we can have a clear overview, fast overview of these users' features. And on the profile picture, the background picture, that can all give us indications on the kind of user. They don't really need to be profiles of interest to us, because here you see some such as sports person, news agency. Maybe they're just referring to a piece of news, but that's not what we're interested in. So we should also consider that these are very volatile. These are accounts which usually have only few followers and little interaction. So we will curate. We have thousands of users, and let's filter out those that have 10 followers. It's 100 followers, sorry. So we do filter, and we find who? 2. One has no follower and is following no one, and this other one has 57 followers. This is the username and their own features. So out of those that we've seen, we could select some. There's one that has no picture. This other one has a picture, but this other one doesn't even have a profile picture or a background picture. With this second one, let's see what's going on. Let's pick it. upload it into our interface, and the tool allows to look into 3 larger groups. So if we have 3 targets, first group would be about a user profile, see who they are related to, what about the followers, apps they are using, time of postings. Second group would be looking into specific geographical locations or coordinates, finding out what's happening at a march or a protest or somewhere where there's been an attack. We want to see what the time is, the hours before the attack and everything else. And we can get information from there. And maybe it is true we're focusing on jihadist terrorism. But let me highlight that this information, this analysis can be replicated elsewhere in other context settings. Maybe there is an advertising campaign and see the impact on a given district or something of that kind. And then there's a third group to look into Teamflick, and that is global timeline. So it's not a profile that we have, it's not a location that we have, but we want to see, for example, information regarding what's mentioned with a hashtag, who's talking to whom, and get the conversations out. So when we don't have a clear idea and it's all a bit blurred. So we had users, and as part of the users, we chosen some that we thought would be interesting for our investigation. And so what we're going to do is, okay, first of all, we're interested in finding out contacts. So this is account information, first of all. We'll get that. Every information produced here is all the big clips and pictures, and CSV as well can be sent to visualization to have graphs. So here we have this user. The location can be tampered with, but well, here we have Saudi Arabia, 57 followers and just 1 tweet posted. This was done in June, and well, this is new information, and it's still an active account. As for the cases that we will discuss today, I don't want you to have a number of users or a specific case. I just want you to understand it globally. You need to understand, same as we said before, Telegram, it uses backup channels built at a given time, unpublished. They just created them. They store the content, and when needed, it is posted. Twitter is the same. They have the account built. Maybe they haven't published a thing, but they can close it down fast. And when there is an incident or an attack or a claim, that account gets the avatar, the background and content, and disseminates for as long as it can. Yes, true. Here we would like to see what's the environment of the user. As you can see, there's barely any follower, only little information shared, but there is a feature on this tool to see who the contacts are, people that have interacted with them. So we can understand that the information produced, and we will see that, would be users that are aware of each other's existence. So these are of interest. Maybe it's not that they are following each other, but they posted or replied, or any other kind of operation, such as adding them to a list. Maybe didn't write them to them, but added to a list with a given description where there are other users that share a given ideology. So what we'll do is we will limit this as well. This is real time. This is right now. Let's narrow it down, the number of contacts. And so now we are looking into it, get information out of servers, friends, But as I said before, if it's been added to a list, or if this user, who is included who, what users have included our target into their list, where there's been a mention, if someone has sent a message or can reply. So, we'll see what we have. This is a list of users. This is done fast, and we have every detail here. We see the relationship towards our target that we got and what it has to do with everything else. So we have followers and friends and people they've interacted with and that have been included in some list. And so we have the user's ID, we have the background picture. At any given point, we can click on a user and we can see the profile or the tweet, post, and little movement here, see? Only few followers, little activity, which are a better match to what we were seeing. Not so much interest in followers or friends or lists. I will focus on messages rather. Let's see who the user has interacted with. Here you see that just by clicking and filtering those that have had some kind of relationship, we see the picture there, user. So this first one. If you can speak Arabic, that'd be easier for you. But here we see a tweet sent by a user retweeting a tweet from our target. Let's check it out. And this is it. I cannot speak Arabic, but let me translate it for you using Google. With Google Translate. Not reliable, but at least we will get an idea what the message is. So here what it says is, well, if it's an Islamic connection, they should not be charged with terrorism. A kind of a message that might mean nothing, or maybe it does. We are interested in it because it's about an event, recent event. All right. So following on this profile, the one that we reached from the previous one. So these are clips and pictures published, and there you could get automatically all that content out to look into it later on. But let's visualize it, because right before the presentation it was working and I wanted to comment on it. Lots of pictures and clips. Well, there are references to bombs here. Might be interesting, right? It gives us extra information. So I cannot copy paste this one, but with Magneto we'll see how that if we look into this picture that we can download, we feed it onto Magneto, and with OCR techniques and other several techniques, it extracts information, mines it out, translate it, and then we can perform searches on it. That will expedite things. All right. Back to the tool. We can keep pulling the thread, reach other users and other followers with them, and get the list of the followers for a given user. We could see what topics are being discussed. I don't know. The first 40 words mostly used on a given day. We can use those filters, and we can filter per date, per hour, per number of tweets, which include a keyword or another one that has been published on a given app, for example, published from Instagram or Android or iPhone. And with multimedia content that can be retweeted. So there are several parameters. What about words? For the last 2 weeks, that's what's preset. That's the default value, but we can choose whatever we want. From 5 years ago, because we want to check out specific time. That's important because that way, as I've said before, we can look into something that has already happened. And Paris attacks. That was Friday the 13th, some years ago. So there was an analysis back then of what was going on. So they would look into the area or the locations where the attacks had happened. As you probably remember, there had been several attacks at several locations. Simultaneously, almost simultaneously. So we can mine those locations out, mine the content out. Actually, we got videos and pictures. That is right before that, and that's the attacks on the soccer stadium. There are videos from just a few minutes before, and maybe on the video was someone of interest, a person of interest, and see who they were with, whether they had a backpack or maybe a red jacket.
So you can imagine that would be information that we're interested in analyzing and accessing. What else can we find? Information on protected accounts, which maybe you can't access the profiles. Not so much the cases that we've told you about right now, so far. And yet there are different types of investigations. For instance, in social engineering, or in pen testing, or analysts who want to go deeper into detail for a private individual. So we might be able to access accounts that are protected and then see maybe user activities. In this particular case here, what's been the activity in the last year? Let's run a search and let's see what we can find. Well, this particular user, not very interesting, only one tweet had been posted. But we can check and see if he retweets what videos or images or at what times of day or night, so that might give us a clue of where they're located, geographically located, trying to guess if he tweets at night or during the day. So the most interesting area, as we said at the beginning of the presentation, for us is that area where the physical world and the virtual world overlap. Imagine I start with a Twitter account in 2015, but I become a radical, I abandon my friends, I make new acquaintances, and if I go back on time, if the police goes back and checks my account, well, they might come to that conclusion and find some more signs and indications for them to devise a particular hypothesis and eventually find somebody of interest. Right. We were telling you about this user that we had found indirectly through another user. Let me just run a demo here for you to get an idea how we can extract the multimedia content. This is the user, and I'm now going to extract multimedia content, only focusing on, say, the last 50 tweets this man posted. In this case, the system is going quite fast, downloading images and videos and associated details. And this is what we would see. For instance, images or videos that have been posted, which application he used for those posts, if it was multimedia content that were a response to some other user, what likes or how many likes or retweets and who by, or seeing where the content originally came from, at what time, if it was straight afterwards or maybe the following day. All of that can give us some clues as to where the contents have been posted. Is it just very quickly for you to get an idea? I wanted to show you that example. So we could do something like this for the last 5 years, say, and those images could then be analyzed by Magneto. Okay, we can talk a little bit more about this too if we have additional time at the end. I hope that you're getting an idea of what kind of work we do. As author of Tinfoil Leak, geolocation was really valued at the beginning, extracting information and then using Google Earth. And that's interesting, right? True. But there's more than that. Using public information, because there's information that doesn't depend on us. If I see a tweet, if I post a tweet because I like running, for instance, and I post something, and the police would know, if they investigate me, that I have that application, that I use that application for running. Oh dear, unfortunately the large screen doesn't seem to be working. That's a shame. Okay, the presentation now continues talking about Tinfoil Leak. And I just want to encourage you to download it and to make comments that will hopefully contribute to make it better. Not only that, there are different Linux possibilities, whether it's Kali, well, a number of them, along OSINT Socs. So if you're familiar with one of those, you can use that particular version, or you might want to have a look at the most recent version that I have on my repository if you access my website. Oh dear, I don't know if those smaller screens are working. Maybe we can enlarge that so you can see it a little bit better using the full screen. That's better now.
Entonces, bueno, pero voy a tener que salir. Ahora, lo que hemos visto hasta el momento ha sido cómo...
Okay, so Magneto, you can see, has extracted some profiles. For us, in this case, Twitter was our main interest. So the extraction is very similar to what Tinfoil Leak does, generating a particular type of file And again, we want to see that overlapping area where the physical world interacts with the virtual world. We're going to see that with information and very visually. After processing the information, the tool then needs to know what specifications we want to give it for it to work in one particular way or another. You see? We need to specify here, because this is an open source tool. We can give all the information on profiles that we've investigated, or well, not investigated, sorry, dragged really, so we can then investigate them. Well, what we do then is importing them graphically, so that through network analysis techniques, we can then visually see that interaction, that overlapping area that we saw between those two circles.
De acuerdo. Vamos a ver.
En este caso lo que vamos a ver es un grafo estático.
In this case, we're going to see a static graph. So, first of all, we get information from different profiles communicating amongst them. That's all we had. And then because we had raw data, you can't tell what the network looks like, which elements we want to go into more detail into. But now, look at that. Oh dear, the mouse doesn't seem to like me. I want to zoom in, but I don't seem to manage. So, what we're trying to do now, if I manage, I'm going to stop it first and then try again. But anyhow, the idea is that depending on the information that we've given it, it seems to have crashed. But anyhow, just to give you an idea, every one of those dots is a Twitter user. And then the lines are messages that are shared, posts that are shared, and where that goes. You can see that on the top left, there are great big nodes with a lot of friends or followers. And depending on what the theme is for that particular post, well, we might then select out of the maybe thousands of users, maybe 7 or 8 that we think might be potentially interesting. Apologies because the interactive infographics didn't work. But we just wanted you to understand that it really helps us understand the history and fluctuations of a particular communication system. So, let me try and show you now a little bit the same thing, but more visually, because the previous graph was a little bit static, right? It was a given point in time. You don't see who follows who, for instance, over time. So, what am I going to show you now? We have that head, well, that's our user. And then that white dot there is content, whatever type. So depending on the extension of those contents that are posted, that can give us a good idea of what type of content are being tweeted, whether it's images or videos or what. And then the green ray, that stands for the type of dissemination or transfer. So you see different people sharing contents, in this case images. You see how that spreads out, they come and go, different messages, different images, and that goes on and on to give us an idea of the time involved in those connections. This is like a slow motion version, just for you to get an idea of how it works. For you to efficiently and truly understand the power of what this can do.
Un poco vamos a ver realmente cómo sería esa difusión. ¿Vale? Podemos ver cómo hay algunos elementos, en este caso, por ejemplo, cómo se veía, cómo él solo ha formado este grupo de cómo ha difundido todo este contenido. Eso es lo que comentamos anteriormente, cómo una sola persona, ¿de acuerdo?, puede coger y gestionar diversos. Hay canales en los cuales se puede observar cómo difunden diversas personas diferentes contenidos, en cambio hay otras, como por ejemplo se puede ver como este personaje de aquí, él solo se está generando el canal. Puede ver cómo se va poco a poco, cómo va fluctuando, cómo van creándose los diferentes canales, cómo se van creando las diferentes y el tipo de contenidos que van difundiendo, ¿vale? Te puedes fijar más en uno, te puedes ver el tipo de canal, el usuario. Vemos cómo hay periodos en los cuales la difusión es más brutal, otros en los cuales se ralentiza. También va en función de la franja horaria, de si hay algún suceso o no, que te puede ser de interés, ¿vale? Aquí podemos acercarnos, podemos ir moviéndonos y puedes ver como un momento determinado, puedes ver cuál es el tipo de funcionamiento, ¿vale?
Eso sí, perdona, Carlos, es el timeline de este año.
Correcto.
De contenido publicado este
Aquí
año.
lo que se ha extraído ha sido la totalidad de lo que hemos comentado al principio de los más de 4 millones de mensajes. Aquí lo que se ha hecho ha sido utilizar de una forma gráfica, ¿vale?, especialmente para esta demostración, cómo interactúan, ¿vale?, cómo se van moviendo, cómo fluctúan. Aquí se verían como un canal avanza, cómo crece más, crece menos, el tipo de contenido, ¿vale? Aquí tenemos el timeline, donde podemos ir cambiando la fecha y podemos ver en ese momento determinado cómo evolucionan. Si dejásemos que tuviésemos tiempo y dejásemos que pase todo el proyecto hacia adelante, podríamos observar cómo cada vez el árbol se iría haciendo cada vez más importante. A partir de aquí vemos, bueno, cómo se van formando. Y esto es una forma, de forma visual, igual que hemos podido ver cómo de forma estática se han ido creando. Aquí está claro a qué momento yo puedo determinar, puedo hacer zoom, puedo venir a un momento determinado, ver una ID que me pueda interesar por el tipo de contenido, por el tipo de mensaje que pueda buscar. Esto, por ejemplo, también lo puedo hacer, en vez de hacer de forma global para esta presentación de todo lo que sería Telegram, se puede hacer perfectamente con Twitter, se puede hacer simplemente con un canal específico, se puede hacer sobre un usuario para ver el tipo de contenido o cómo interacciona con los demás personajes de la red.
Aquí, como estábamos viendo, era el timeline de todo este año, como decía, nos podemos
Correcto.
ir a mover a un mes concreto, a una fecha que nos interesa y decir, bueno, pues entre este día y este día, cómo se ha movido,
Correcto.
o cuándo se creó este canal, o podemos ver canales temáticos.
Hay herramientas de análisis más complejas, la mayoría suelen ser de pago, donde la forma visual es parecida, pero te permite funcionalidades como almacenarlo en base de datos y a partir de ahí puedes ir alimentando para poder obtener, bueno, en un momento determinado, un histórico de toda esa información. A ver. Vale. Aquí lo hemos comentado, es la segunda parte que hemos comentado ahora. ¿Vale? Y aquí, a ver si se puede ver. ¿Se ve?
Sí.
¿Sí?
I hope you can see that okay. We saw the process dynamically earlier, and now this is the static version. On this graph, what is particularly interesting for us? Well, each one of those dots would be is a user, posting and disseminating contents. So, if I don't have enough resources to investigate all those profiles, what should I do? Well, logically, focus on those that I consider are the main nodes. And then I might say, right, I want to focus on Spanish-speaking channels or a particular thematic channel. And then that would be really effective, right? So, at the same time as we can study how it all works, we can also see heat maps. For instance, for a time of day, seeing how many messages were posted at that particular time. I don't know if you can see it. Now you need to move on to the next one. Is that working now? No, it's stuck on the previous slide. It's not our day, right, today? Not technically speaking, anyway.
No, es que se ha quedado en la... A ver ahora. Mira a ver si se ve ahora que se ha cerrado. Ahora que se ve la presentación.
Ahora sí.
¿Sí? Sí. Vale. Al igual que veíamos...
Now it's working. So, as I said, we could see changes and fluctuations on different channels. And here we see a heat map. If we want to focus on a particular time of a particular day and see how many messages were posted or shared and so on, we can do so. Also focusing on a particular channel like Twitter or a particular user or at the time of day or night when we know that that user is most active. Well, that's interesting, so that I can keep an eye at those times. Can you tell them a little bit about space? That's true, I'd forgotten about that. Can you see that gap there between late May and late June? There's like a gap of information. And when we first looked at that heat map, I remember we said, hang on a minute, why are messages missing from that period of time? Well, that was Ramadan. That's what it was. And on the social media, people were asked to use the social media less. In this case, it was Telegram, so they could abide by Ramadan more so. So that kind of heat map can give us clues, and so that we can go from data and facts and figures to true intelligence. So, as I said, we need to, with this, we can hopefully track and find the most relevant individuals. We've been talking about user profiles that we might be interested in monitoring. Right, so now how can we get information from the contents they post or share? In this case, our website, we can see this website in Spanish. It was a shooting competition they were talking about. So this is a case of propaganda. They're advertising a shooting course and explaining how they've gone about it in the past. Then on their next section, they talk about Daesh and how they look after their members and followers. Because when we talk about propaganda, it's not just them saying they should go and cut people's heads off. They also talk wonderful things about themselves. Sometimes messages are text, often in Arabic, with hashtags. So it can then be shared and reposted and tweeted, or so that users can find them more easily. One of those images is a threat in the case of the Barcelona terrorist attack. The other one talks about Shiite training camps in Iran. Sometimes documents look more like this, whether it is an Excel sheet or a TXT. Excels often have to do with the so-called kill lists. That is, lists of individuals they want to target and eliminate. Are those kill lists objectives? Well, sometimes they've hacked public organizations and published those lists or posted those lists. In this case, they hacked an American company that sold instruments, and they dumped that database, and unfortunately 10 Spanish nationals were included on that list. So when you monitor profiles, we also try and be proactive as much as possible. We, depending on what information we find, for instance, we found this file where Spanish nationals might be in danger or it's a threat, right? Well, we want to make the most of that and act upon it. In the case of the Spain IP file, well, that was a Daesh, a pro-Daesh channel, because there are cases where channels are not there on behalf of actual practitioners. Sometimes they just publish propaganda, or sometimes they give them logistical support, and some 60,000 IPs were published in this case at threat of remote desktop vulnerability. I said at the beginning of my presentation that they love posters, and they post in different languages. Spanish is one of the most popular languages. I also said earlier that they also publish handbooks and instructions about how to encrypt communications. The one here on the right, for instance, explained step by step how to build this device. A very simple device, but it can actually make a train derail. Well, if you wonder, would a follower go home and build something like this and do something like that? Well, just a couple of weeks later, after this was posted, there were a number of incidents in Catalonia where large boulders were positioned on the rail tracks. So sometimes they don't copy exactly what was proposed, but they adapt it. At the top, we see the video with the claim for authorship of the Barcelona terrorist attacks, and the one down below is a video explaining how to manufacture chemical weapons. They also use browser extensions. This is a program they used in the past for communications encryptions, some indoctrination publications or posts, in this case, on how to find IPs or phone books, or and also explaining to their members how to encrypt their communications and data. In this case, Bitcoin addresses were posted. Why? Well, because they want to access financial resources. So we've been talking about files and images and audio and video, because in the age of big data, what they do is try and use all that information turn into intelligence. And that's what we try and do as well, to understand what they're doing. So, because there are so many messages and information that we need to monitor, I knew time ago that we needed an application to be able to handle all of that. And that's why I designed Magneto, this application, so that I can extract the most interesting part of all that information. And one of the main elements that we often identify with social media are phone numbers. So I'm going to show you now how phone numbers can be extracted from social media. We want to try and get as much information as possible from what we can access. That's right, because sometimes it might be something small. Well, it looks small, right? A phone number or a picture. That might give us the clue to move ahead in our investigations.
Let's see if this works, and we'll see some of the elements that I have visible now. We have a few more features, but it didn't fit into my display, so I had to shorten it. What we are interested in is mining phone numbers out here. So what we can ask is the kind of information of prefixes that we're interested in. Here what we have is, let's try what we are most interested in. Here that would be Spain. So let's see if we have Spanish phones that we can get out of the database. Since we've been recording, we will mask the numbers so that they cannot be identified. So here you can see how there are 7 phone numbers from Spain that can be located on this media. So 33, I think that's France. Again, well, we have some, but this is the very last year, that's right, but all the data, again, yeah, this is Spain last year. But what information can we get? We're interested in the phone numbers, and from here onwards we see there are different techniques, and with the phone number you can reach users, social media, other kinds of information. So there is an interesting element here, as we said before at the beginning of this presentation, and that is the large number of people arrested. I think I didn't say it, but most of the people arrested were from Morocco, first or second generation. And so we'll try to find those phones from Morocco. And why is that? We see there are a few of those. Why? Because that's easy for them. They can keep using Moroccan numbers in Spain, and then through the contact network, whether it is family or friends, they can still get money on the card from the source country. What about the US? Yeah, that's right. In Spain, only a few would show. Morocco, there were many more. And then the US. So we've said so. It is easy to use those virtual numbers because most of the virtual numbers are from the United States. But if we check how many numbers start with a 1, that is the prefix for the US, we see there are a few of those. And that's where we see that there are some that use their own phone number. And that's an indication, the area code, that's an indication we need to work with. But we can produce a list with it. So we've said, and I've said, Vicente said, how after analyzing different kinds of profiles, whether on Twitter or Telegram, we have Twitter, we have Teamfolix and Magneto. So there is tracking of users, followers, and also pictures are mined out. Not just a profile, but those posted. Because maybe a text, we might not find something relevant on text, but We can follow keywords and have a list of words that we might be interested in to have constant monitoring. And here, we might be interested in reading or interpreting the pictures that are being posted. Using OCR or other mechanisms, this is a real example that it was processed. We mine the contact. And so this is not we have blue shades and we have pictures and there's a whole range there, and from there onwards there's the first mining and then we translate it, and that's when we can, based on the kind of search we want to conduct, I will be able to see if any of those profiles that, well, because of the user name or maybe the profile that we didn't find interesting, but with an automated analysis of the pictures posted, it could be interesting. Here you have they claim the attack in Barcelona. Same way here, as we see this kind of a content, we've also said there are some posters. Here what we see is, well, see this? We have message, well, an email. Here you have the information available in English, and you can read the image, the picture, interpret it, and from there onwards with different filters. So if I use messy as a keyword, we said that already. This is not just about, well, so these are tools that can use for detection of these profiles, but also to detect brands or other kinds of information that you can find useful. So here you have a test that I will run for you, if I manage. This is what we said before. Let's try and find what we can from pictures. So we said the attack on Barcelona, right? We've mentioned it. So of all those pictures, let's try and see if in any of those pictures, not as text, but actually embedded text, let's try and see if they show Barcelona, right? So if it all works out for us, it should give us, yeah, it does. Okay, so it should stop at some point. Here, I showed you the screen. It interprets the picture, so there's a world, there is a sky diagram, and the text from the picture, it seems to be in English, but then the translation, this is what we have. This is a map of Europe as translated from 2017. And so, if I get the URL and I look it up, see? This is a world map. And there's lots of information published here. So, see, this is Spain. In small print, it says Catalonia and Barcelona. If I had looked up Madrid, probably that would have been similar. Alright, next one. Same thing here. So, first interpretation, probably Arabic, right? So, it's structured like this. It says it's advertising, it's a poster, a banner. And it says that, well, security operations, that says bombs. Let's get the easiest one. Get the URL and search through the database and see what is it. It's making a fool of me. So it's 4.5 million messages. Can you imagine what it would be like to do so manually? It is not doable to have so many people, translators and people just downloading images and pictures and going through all of them. This cannot be. First one, I've read it. So, we haven't read this, but what was it? Night, darkness. And here, you had materials, Barcelona struggle, video. So, distraction here, you can see that. It helps you out. It's an indication that can help you see this. So if you got this kind of a picture, or rather profile, that would be it. If they're sharing this link and this claim of Barcelona's attack, so that it would be interesting to monitor it. All right. Can you see this? Can you? So, also following the process, what we find interesting is metadata. I haven't said yet, but Telegram, what it does is, it deletes metadata from pictures, but not from other documents. With that in mind, we've all said so, utilizing the overlapping between physical world and virtual world. Usually when you set up your Office software, or Windows rather, you have a username and you use something that something that describes you, and they will say, hello Carlos. But most applications with a Word or PDF, it embeds it. And so here, let's say, here for example, you see how on the top of it, you have the app, the author of all files, and with this name, this is Arabic, this is a headline when it's been changed, and with that, trying to gather information, number of users, and then different social media with the different apps that we are familiar with, and that's how we find out other social media where the nick is used. Doesn't mean that this is the evil, the bad guy here, but this is an indication that will help us. And with that, you can have an email address and maybe access to other services, and then all the, around the environment and the setting. It's about pulling the thread once again, connecting the dots, as it is said. Let me give you another example. Often, when you're on a channel or medium and looking for a profile, you come across information which visually isn't useful anymore. Magneto could be used here, but visually, we realized that after an attack in the Champs-Élysées in France, there's this medium that posted a picture, well, a piece of news. I don't know whether you can see that, but if you check out the picture, it is not a photograph. It's not been downloaded, but it's not been downloaded from the internet. It was just a home TV picture, so they've taken it from their home TV. And that's Spanish TV. And this was all Arabic. So one of the administrators is in Spain. So we see the number of resources and social media that we need to go through. So it is simpler to focus on some channels. And we've already said that there are different kinds of channels. One of which would be weapon sales. I think I've said it before, it's not just about following targets, but actually you need to try and be ahead of them and see how they work and how can you make the most of it and take some advantage. And this looks like an ambulance, right? I don't really know why, but it got my attention. If I look at it in further detail, I realized that it was from Grenada. So, had been taken down to Syria or Iraq, wherever the ambulance was. But the same as with this one, there was another one from Vitoria, northern Spain. In case you don't know, one of the systems they follow for attacks, terrorist attacks, would be a small one in a public space. And emergency services go there to help victims, and just law enforcement and ambulances, and they go investigate. And there's a fake one, it's a forgery filled with explosive, and once the ambulance is there in the area, they kill themselves and the damage is greater. not just for civilians, but mainly military and police forces. This is another example. We've said it already. This has to do with the hackers, and there's a list, as we said, with vulnerable IPs, where we can see there's a 60% that were vulnerable to remote desk attacks, and we could see there was the public company Creel Red, and there were some that were with the Ministry for Defense, and so we tried to be proactive. And these are data that we can use, but when we got this information, we reported so that they could check whether those IPs were properly set up in order to avoid other problems. We've talked about Twitter and Telegram, but let's talk about Facebook. Sometimes it's not just what we said before, it's not just using tools. Well, this was a dissemination activity in 2017. The French authorities were searching for this person. We've just crossed out, redacted the name, because they thought he was a conflict returnee and there was a threat. And after this first picture, I tried to find information on several social media. Here I found a piece of information that I found was interesting on Facebook. So this is the picture, and it might seem that is quite similar to the person, right? But if you pay closer attention, what we realize is that the picture by the French authorities is just a cut-off of the profile Facebook picture. So at least we know that this Facebook profile is what they are looking after. That's what the French authorities are looking for. We keep on social media and we find another profile, quite similar, but not clear about it. Different name, different location, different country. So it's not just about using tools, but also the expertise and analysis techniques. We have three pictures here. We might say that this is what I have, this is the same person, and this is the Facebook profile, and this is what's published by the French authorities. This on the right side, the overlapping ones are the same, so we keep this here. So if we start looking, we can see some features. We see there is a freckle right above the eyebrow. Well, it seems it could help us identify him. So both left and right pictures show an interesting eyebrow end. And if we check another feature, another freckle or a mole next to the nose, we see there is a perfect match. And without an expertise forensic report, so we might still see that this is the same person. And also the kind of the beard, and it's an indication. This Van Dyke beard is an indication. And why is it so interesting? Because in the profile he was using, he said that he was living in Cordoba, southern Spain. So if he's on the run and had been living in Cordoba, it might be that at a given point he could be in Cordoba to try have support from his friends and kin. They've also posted Bitcoin addresses, not usual, but sometimes they do publish it in order to try and get some funding. As you know, Bitcoin is traceable, and with that what we do is learning that account, where does it get the money from, what other accounts are fitting it. And as you can see from 4, here we have the character flow, or string rather, and even if we don't see the income deadlines or times, but still 4 checked from 4 times they got money coming in. So if we see the arrow, they paid back to the so-called mother account, starting with a 15. If we do look into the other accounts, I don't know if you can see, but those that have a circle were the first accounts that paid to the mother account, but each of these accounts in turn has gotten money or has withdrawn money, which indicates what? We all know, and we said it at the beginning, we might have used social media or an alias that even if you change it, there is a history, there's a background. But so you've tried to anonymize it and have it on Facebook, but you can also have searchers in different areas, different places, to try and see if any of this has been published, and from there try to de-anonymize so far as possible this kind of a transaction. In the end, what this is all about is trying to, whether with Magneto, teamful leaks or whatever, the type of mechanism, it's about finding with, same as with the OSINT or SOCMINT or UMINT, these are techniques that will always be complementary, it will be a support, but it might help us get some clues and signs showing to us the light to try and find a profile or try and monitor some items to be proactive and not just wait for that kind of attacks or threats. Anything else? I think we're doing right on time, okay? Yeah, and we've nailed it, haven't we? So, this is what we wanted to say. It's not just about social media, but actually it's a matter of time, dedication. And so we need to understand that we need to use tools and methodologies, but also our analyst skills is important to try and extract that, because that's what ends with that product that is then finally delivered. That's been all for us. Thank you very much for your attendance.